Okay, we are recording, and welcome to another edition of Neighborhood Conversations presented by the Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association. And I am your moderator, Tim Weeks. Today, our guest is Senator Farrell Haile of District 18, which is Sumner, Trisdale, and part of Davidson counties. Welcome, Senator.
Good morning. Glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, they've hit the bottom of the barrel by letting me moderate this thing, so
I thought you were going to say hit the bottom of the barrel by interviewing me. So,
not at all. We're honored to have you for a few minutes, Senator. And I've always enjoyed working with you when public television was covering the General Assembly, and it's good to see you again for DHNA. Let's start with a question about your district, though. Nashville is a blue island in a red ocean. We know that. Your district, which is Sumner, Trisdale, mainly, is very red. It's Republican territory, no doubt about it. It's Diane Black country. But there's this little sliver of blue in it, which is Davidson County, which is us, even though I'm not declaring my political allegiances here in this interview. But do Davidson County voters and issues really get your attention the same weight as Sumner and Trisdale? Because we're just a small part of your district.
well, you're actually 15% of my district. Trisdale County is only 10%. So you have a larger portion of my district than you recognize. It is difficult to connect to the Davidson County part of my district. The reason is when I come to a chamber meeting over there, say there's 100 folks in the room, there might be 10 in my district, and I don't know which 10 that is. So, I feel like that I'm trying to serve all of that community that's in that chamber district, even though 90% is not in my district. I still have a focus for that part of my district, which is Davidson County. And coming back to this past session, I argued for monies, and as we came down to the final budget on that, there was money that was going to the counties and municipalities, $200 million. And initially there were 14 million for Davidson County, and that was being cut down to 5 million. I argued against that and was able to raise that back up to 10 million. So I think that has a demonstration of my concern for Davidson County, certainly for my portion of the district. Now I want to come back, and you mentioned that this blue strip. Well, that strip is not so blue in my district, or at least it wasn't when I did have a Democrat opponent in there. We came out about 50-50 in that portion of the district. So I would push back a little bit against that it's a totally blue strip of land in the district. May not be as much red as it is in the other part of my district, but I don't think that it's totally blue there.
All right, thank you. Just curious though, you're running for your third full term, I believe.
That's correct.
Now, don't be offended if I asked you how old you are.
I am 73, will be 74 in December.
Well, happy birthday in advance.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, will you go on record to say this is going to be your last rodeo? Is this your last term?
My wife keeps asking that question. There's lots of things that come into play to that. No, I would not make a definite statement one way or the other. Health comes into play. I'm heavily involved in safe baby courts, of getting that established in the state. We have currently 7. We've added 5 more. I'll be visiting those this fall, as I did the 7 last fall. I want to see that throughout the state. I think that is a huge advantage to families that are struggling in the DCS system. More particularly, I think it's a huge advantage for children. And so I do not want to give up on what we're able to do on the safe baby courts and for children in the state of Tennessee and for adoption. That will play into it. But to just answer your question, I don't have an answer. I don't even know myself what I would do. I will say driving to Nashville, getting up at 5 in the morning to try and beat the traffic into Nashville when we're in session gets a little bit old. And at my age, there comes a time when you think, why don't I enjoy life a little bit more instead of rushing off to Nashville during all this time? But the same token, I have figured out one of the things. I served 100 days. As you may recall, I was appointed by the county commission, served 100 days just to see what this was all about. Two things that I found out. One, it's important who's there. And second is you can have some influence. And so I feel like that I'm having some influence on adoption, on foster parents, on adoption process, children in DCS, and I think that's important work. It is to me personally. And so to say that I'm going to step down after this term, I don't know. I do know 12 years is a long time to serve. I acknowledge that.
All right. Well, while we're on the subject of age, let's bring in a friend of yours, Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally. Now, you're the Speaker pro tempore, so that makes you kind of second in line, I guess, in layman's terms. Now, he's going to be 77 the next session, and his next reelection will be in 2 years. How long do you think he's going to serve? Now,
I have no statement on that. No opinion, no statement. I hope a long time. He does a great job. He's been very gracious to me. I do enjoy presiding, which he's allowed me to do several times, but I serve at his pleasure. And I haven't, you need to ask him those questions, not me.
Well, I'm sneaking up on you. I'm trying to ask you whether you have any aspirations to be lieutenant
I'm
governor.
not going there either. You need to move on. You're barking up the wrong tree.
All right. I thought I could trap you, but I failed. The Republicans have a supermajority. What do you consider the greatest achievements of the General Assembly in the last 4 years?
2 or 3 things. One is financial. I think that we have put the state in an extremely strong financial position to go through this COVID-19 downturn. We are a low tax state. We've been able to maintain that, but yet have extremely strong financial position. If not the #1 state, we're extremely close to being the strongest financially state in the union. That's a great place to be. I think that speaks highly of what we've accomplished. Second is, I think that we've made huge inroads for education, both on the college level and the K through 12 initiative. We've increased teacher salaries just continually, have done that much more than any other administration going back as far as I've been able to tell. In fact, we've done more than any 2 administrations together. I'm talking about Haslam and then now as we begin the Lee administration. So my term there, the 8 years that I've been there, that's what we've been able to accomplish for teachers. And then the third thing that I would mention, I just have to come back to this safe baby court and taking care of children and adoption and trying to make the lives of children better. And part of that's education. Part of it is getting in a stable home quicker. The national average to the child that's in state custody is 3 years to get them to a permanent home. Well, you take a child 0 to 5 years old, that's 80% of their brain development. Science tells us that chronic adverse issues with them causes a deterioration in that brain development, that the brain doesn't develop as it needs to. It affects 3rd grade reading level, affects the entire lives of children. And so you take 3 years out of there where they're in a chronic turmoil. Look what you've done to that child. With these safe baby courts, we're able to do that, get them to a permanent home in 9 months. 50%, really more than 50% of the time, we're able to stabilize that family. They go back to the biological family, and they don't come back into state custody. Greater than 50% of the time. That's a great win. It's a win for the child. It's a win for the family. It's a win for the judiciary. It's a win for the taxpayer. You don't have all those court costs. You don't have the court battles going on. Then the other percentage, what we're looking for is for that child to wind up in an adoptive situation, in a permanent home, whether it's with a foster home or whether it's with adoptive parents within that 9-month period without the court battle. The biological parent comes to recognize, I can't raise this child the way that this child deserves to be raised. And so they allow surrender of the child to take place and adoption to take place without the court battle. Again, you got to win for the child. You got to win for the judiciary. You got to win for both the biological parent because the child has gone to a stable home, win for the foster or adoptive parents, and a win for the taxpayer. So it's 4 wins taking place there.
Well, you're passionate on that issue, and it shows. And we admire your courage to and persistence in addressing these issues. But speaking of children, let's touch base on a couple of issues. One is the heartbeat abortion bill. A little controversial, I guess, if you want to say that. It passed this last session, but I remember in 2019 that Lieutenant Governor McNally said, Speaker of the Senate, he said, this is going to end up in courts and this is going to cost a lot of money. And we really just don't want to go there. And it didn't have the support in the Senate in 2019, but it passed in 2020. So why did the General Assembly go forward with this, knowing that it was going to end up in the courts? And it has. U.S. District Court judges halted the rollout practically before Governor Lee's signature dried on the piece of paper.
Right.
So what was your position on that bill, and why did the General Assembly push this through?
I think part of the General Assembly's response was to the governor. This was really important to Governor Lee, and I appreciate that. It's important to me. From a theological point of view, I believe that's when life starts. I know that there is those that disagree with that. There's those that say it begins at conception, and then we've got those that go so far as to even say it doesn't even begin after the child is born, that you can still destroy this life. And so I think from a biblical, scriptural standpoint, life is in the blood. From a science standpoint, life is in the blood. So the heartbeat timing on that, to me, lines up both with science and with scripture. And with that, I'm comfortable. Now, there's some nuances with all that I think is what really has got this in the court.
All right. Well, another controversial bill that passed this past session was the voucher bill. I guess the controversy part was the vote in the House, which you can't speak about, which we don't want to go there. But the Tennessee Court of Appeals says it's unconstitutional because it applies only to Memphis and Nashville. What was your vote on the voucher bill, and do you think it's time to start over?
Well, first off, it wasn't a pure voucher bill. It's different from that. I do support voucher bills. I supported this bill. The ruling of the court, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a judge. So we'll all leave that to the judges to determine. But I don't see how that, because it was limited to Davidson and Shelby County, which is where we have the most need of children. Most failing schools are in those 2 districts. So I thought it was legitimate to look at those two districts. We do that a lot in other areas. We'll look at different counties and, uh, you know, I'll go back to safe baby courts. We're going through one county at a time, trying to get these in the counties. Does that mean because we didn't do a whole SWAT of it that it's illegal? So I struggle with that ruling. Again, I'm not the judge, nor an attorney, but I struggle with the logic that makes it unconstitutional.
Right. One other bill that passed this session, just want a quick comment on it, that this has just been a difficult year. You know, a lot of protests with Black Lives Matter, some of it peaceful, some of it got out of hand with violence in downtown Nashville, property destroyed. You've had people camped out down there at the state capitol for weeks and weeks and weeks. But you guys passed a law making camping on state property as a protest a felony, which means 6 years in jail and loss of voting rights. Do you think that was a little bit too strict?
I spoke about that on the Senate floor. You want a quick comment? I'm not sure that I can give a quick comment. I spoke concerning the level of that and asked the question, what really takes place in a court of law when a suspect's brought in, is convicted of this? How much leeway does a judge have in his discretion of what penalty is used, or what statute is used, what degree of criminality is used? And I was told on the Senate floor and also privately that most times this is going to be plead down. Even if it's not, then the judge has the discretion of lowering that to a lesser crime. And that the reality is that only those that are really, really creating some issues that are criminality will, and probably have higher charges than this anyway, would this be used. I think this was, my perception is this was more of a message than it was, this is actually what's going to wind up in a court of law, that the judge is going to sentence someone using this law.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about some issues that are special to your heart. Now, you're a farmer, you have cattle.
Do?
It's not easy being a farmer, whether it's cattle or something else. But the pandemic has been especially hard on farmers. We read this spring during the lockdown process that farmers were having to destroy crops because the market for restaurants dried up. Can you address how the state is trying to help farmers through this difficult crisis and whether there's more that can be done?
I really don't have a good answer for that, to be honest. I don't serve on the ag committee, so I haven't dug into that. I understand the having to destroy some crops and there's not being as much market. As a cattle farmer, I'm looking at the market. I've got some steers right now that I need to sell, and I'm kind of watching that market. Didn't see a huge drop in the cattle prices during this time. There were some changes that had to be made in how you marketed your cattle, like these steers. I've held these steers for additional 4 months, maybe 5 months than maybe I normally would have. But me holding those probably helped the price back then maintain some. And the price is, it's not good. I've very few times has cattle prices ever been good that satisfied a farmer that I know of, but they have maintained from where they were a year ago, pretty close. So from that perspective, farmers are a unique group. They figure out how to get things done and how to work through issues. what is the state doing? Again, I don't have good answers on that, except that well, I'll tell you one thing that we've done for years and years, and I do not participate because I vote on this, and I just don't feel like it'd be proper for me to use it. But we have these ag enhancement program that help farmers. They can buy uh, um, cattle handling equipment. They can buy hay storage units. And what we've done, especially this cattle handling equipment, is we've made it much safer for farmers to have livestock. And we've also, they can use it in the purchase of bulls and of heifers to upgrade their cattle. And so the value of cattle, the quality of our cattle across the state of Tennessee has been enhanced drastically, and that in turn brings better prices. So that's one thing in particular that the state has done, and we continue to do that. We did not cut that out in the last budget. We continue to go forward with that for our farmers.
All right. Well, shifting gear in the healthcare. Now, you've been a pharmacist for over 40 some odd years, right?
That's correct.
And you're also the first vice chair of the health committee in the Senate, correct?
That's correct.
So, comment please on several little subtopics that are health related. The first is every session, there's someone that brings up, we should do Medicaid expansion. I'm sure it will come up again in 2021. There's millions and millions of dollars from the federal government that are available to us, and we're just not using it. So, is your position maybe or no, hell no, never?
My position is that I strongly support the block grant that we've applied for, the block grant waiver, and I feel like the COVID-19 had not come along, we'd have that grant, that authorization from the federal government by now. Let me tell you what that does. That allows the state of Tennessee to continue utilizing the methods that we have in providing health care with savings. All the say we are about our healthcare costs has increased 50% what the normal state average has. What this block grant would allow is currently all that savings goes back to the federal government. Tennessee doesn't get any of that savings. The block grant would allow us to get that savings. It would allow us additional money to be able to use for the in place of Medicaid expansion. We'd be able to serve these folks with these additional funds, plus the funds, 50% of the funds that we've already saved. Not that we're going to save, that's included, but it also allows what we have saved. It goes back to a base that says, all right, this is where we begin. So we would have monies coming in that we don't have coming in now, that we're saving the federal government, and Tennessee would be able to share in that and apply that toward the folks that are in need of some other type of health care assistance.
On the block grant, though, can you update us on its status? I mean, where is it exactly? Because we're looking at a presidential election here in just a few weeks, and things could change drastically.
I know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
Very good.
No, I don't think anybody knows right now.
Well, this next question is just an opinion question, because the legislature obviously can't tell the governor what to do on these issues. But I'm just curious what your opinion is. That the governor did not make a state mandate on wearing masks during the pandemic. He let local government decide that. If the pandemic persists into next year, do you think he should revisit that? And then part B of the question related to the pandemic is, hopefully we're going to have vaccinations available next year. Is this something that you think the state should encourage and promote for people to get vaccinated? Because there's a lot of folks that are anti-vaccinators that just won't do it. You know, I mean, it's good, should be good for everyone, but how can the state promote getting a vaccination to help end this pandemic?
Okay, let me take the second part first. I am not for mandating vaccine. I think the state should encourage. I would encourage everybody to get a vaccine. I'm going to line up the first day available. We have one of our senators is actually a volunteer on the trial that's taking place, or one of the trials that's taking place. I'm strongly supportive of vaccines, have been since I was in, I guess it's first or second grade when we started the Salk vaccine way back then for polio. It develops herd immunity, but I am not for trying to mandate that. One, it won't work. Even though up in Boston, I think it was back in 17, 18, 19, they did that. I'm not for that, but I am for encouraging, whether it's TV advertising, radio advertising, word of mouth, whatever, of encouraging folks to take the vaccine when it becomes available. And I feel completely comfortable with what our big pharma and our scientists will come out with. I just don't have any qualms whatsoever. Our ability to come up with these solutions is so advanced over when I was in school. When I was in pharmacy school, we were going through some of these details, and the medications that were coming out then were just absolutely phenomenal. I thought, how can you improve on this? And all those medications are now obsolete. We have just advanced so much, and the way that we go about this, I feel completely comfortable with the vaccine. Second thing, first thing that you asked was, you wanted me to critique the governor, and I'm not going to do that. I think that we've been in really difficult times, uncharted times. I think that he has called upon resources and advice from lots of folks. I've gotten a call or two on that from time to time on some things that he was going to do. He couldn't call 132 members of the General Assembly and ask them all, what do you think? He had to make some quick decisions. I think that we need to allow him grace in this process. I'm serving as the Senate chairman, along with the House chairman. So we're co-chairman of a ad hoc subcommittee that's reviewing the executive emergency powers of the governor. And each meeting that we've had, my statement has been, we're not critiquing the governor. This is for 50 years down the road. This is for individuals that have yet to be born, how they will be affected, and how our government, the Tennessee legislator and the governor at 50 years, 100 years down the road will deal with these type of issues. And certainly the General Assembly has some interest in being more involved and being able to step in if they think it's necessary. And I think that's reasonable. The General Assembly is looking at some more reporting to the General Assembly, certainly maybe prior to some announcements being made where that we're up to speed on that. But we'll see how that comes out. I think there will be some legislation headed that direction. The governor has indicated that he is supportive of that the General Assembly does. But we just got to remember, nobody expected this. He's acted within the statutes that we currently have. And whatever decision he makes, there's going to be at least 50% that disagree.
Well, looking ahead into 2021 and the next session starting in January, if the pandemic worsens over the winter with possibility of flu in addition to COVID, the economy has taken a hit.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? We've got a pretty healthy rainy day fund. Is it time to dip into the rainy day fund to keep things going as is? Or do you think we'll look at budget cuts next year?
We looked at we looked at a proposal when we did this past budget, a 3-year proposal to overcome whatever deficit. There is a point in time when we do dip into the rainy day fund, and that I anticipate that would come this year, that on a 3-year plan. To be quite honest, we are in better shape than we were predicted, than the economists told us that we would be. Our revenue has been much better from sales tax than what we anticipated. Business tax is the issue. How much dip we're going to have in that, we really don't know that yet. But at this point in time, we're better than we anticipated being. But could we dip into the rainy day fund? Yeah.
Well, related to that, Governor Lee kind of jumped on Mayor Cooper about keeping Nashville business closed more than it should, in his opinion, that it was throttling the economic comeback. Do you think Nashville has been too conservative in how they've applied health guidelines, and whether small business has been too damaged in this process?
I do think that small business took a heavier hit than what they should have. When I'm talking about mom and pop type operations. Felt like that they got thrown into some areas that didn't apply to them on numbers, folks in their businesses, how they did. Just like, well, there's lots of examples, I suppose, but I do have a gut feeling that we overreacted to our small business folks.
Well, last question from me, Senator, or last one or two here. Speaking of next year's session, do you expect it will start on time if the pandemic is still full force this winter?
Yes, I do.
And will business be different? I mean, we had a few legislators report as positive this past session, but to keep this under control and not have a major breakout, do you see anything different in the General Assembly next year?
Well, I anticipate that we're probably going to have the social distancing apply. That's more difficult for the House than it is for the Senate. We can spread our desk out in the Senate and in our conference rooms. So I think that we will carry on the Senate side. You need to talk with the House folks as to what they see going forward there.
Well, I'll give you the last word, Senator Haile, that for the next 4 years, what do you consider to be unfinished business that you're going to spend the time taking on as far as legislation and key things that you consider need to be done?
Well, I've got 4 pages of stuff. Let me see if you can't see that, but I've got 4 pages of bills proposed for this coming year already. A lot of this was stuff that got sidetracked from last year. I anticipate that the General Assembly will start a lot quicker than normal, because I think most members have a list like this that they got sidetracked last year. Some of it has already been gone through the House. Of course, it has to start over and go again. But I think that you're going to see a lot quicker movement take place. We're going to continue to talk about criminal justice reform. I think that is going to be a big deal. I'm also looking with a representative to form a caucus for foster and adoptive parents to look at those issues more closer. How can we get more foster parents in? How can we help them more than we have in the past? Certainly, I talked about the 5 new courts. I'm going to be bringing a bill for broadband to rural area. The co-ops are limited on what they can do. We've got to have a discussion about how we get broadband into these rural areas, especially for students, quicker than what we're doing right now. That will be a big discussion. I could go through the whole list, but I won't. That kind of
Well, since
turnaround, we're going to look at that.
Well, this is just kind of off the top of my head here, but at the beginning of our interview, you talked about it was a hassle driving into Nashville now as you get older, but transportation remains a huge issue. Um, we had a big plan in Nashville that was going to have trains and all this stuff, and that didn't work out. Mayor Cooper's proposed just, doing more things with buses, but there's state money on the table that could help the congestion. And, do you have anything to do with long-term transportation solutions for the Middle Tennessee area?
I do not serve on transportation. The only comment that I would make is that I felt like the last two proposals were, and they were both defeated pretty handedly, were not the best proposals out there. But I certainly don't want to set myself up as being an expert on what does need to be done. It's a really thorny issue. Right now, we're in better shape because of COVID-19. I do think that you're going to see a lot more working at home, that continues, that there's a lot more Zoom meetings taking place. And unfortunately, I think that will turn into that we're going to have a lot of business offices available for rent over the next number of years, where folks are working from home and found out they can do just as good a job at home as they can come into an office. So that may help some with that. And that's been my experience thus far, is that the traffic going in now is not near what it was.
Well, our guest has been Senator Farrell Haile. We want to wish you the best for your campaign and another 4 years in the Tennessee General Assembly. Early voting is underway, and Election Day is November 3rd, so please do your part and go vote.
Yeah.
Our next forum will be live on Facebook October 21st at 7 p.m. The District 4 school board candidates square off for the second time. Our moderator will be Jared Felkins, the editor of Main Street Nashville newspaper. So we'll see you then, and thanks for joining us.
Can I say one thing before you close up?
Absolutely.
Thank you for allowing me to serve. To those that are listening in, it is an honor and a privilege, something I never thought that I would do. Thank you. Have a good day.
Well, thank you, Senator, and it was good to see you again. And thank you for DHNA.
Yes, sir.